Hello and welcome to the presentation for today, which is around Microsoft Azure compliance. And before I actually dive into the topic with demo, let me take an opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Atul Raizada. Many of you have already been watching my technical videos. For those who are watching this video for the first time, I have been in IT for over 20 years and I have been helping customers with their Azure cloud infrastructure or security for quite some time. I've been creating these videos regularly and trying to give back to community as one of my hobby. The responses that I have received against my several videos that I have presented encourages me to keep doing it. And I once again request you, if you like the video and if you see that it gives you the enough information to do your job, please subscribe, as well as please also watch my several other technical videos on my channel. With that, let's get into the actual presentation and demo. And before actually I start talking about the compliance process flow, let's just take a moment to talk about the Microsoft intent around security and compliance. Many of you may already know that Microsoft is actually investing over $1 billion a year just in security space, right? And that speaks volumes about Microsoft's seriousness, Microsoft intent around how they want to protect organizations when they are choosing and embracing Microsoft cloud services for their organization. Now, because this has been an ongoing saga and process for Microsoft, and Microsoft has put it to the highest priority, which I believe that every single organization, whether it's a small or large, whatever industry you guys are working into, security and compliance is the top topic, right? Everything else comes around it, everything else comes underneath it. Any topic that you do, any IT project that you do cannot just go without security and compliance. So I think that's why this particular topic is extremely important and extremely relevant to all of us. The another thing that I see in the industry right now, that when you talk about compliance or security, though Microsoft has done tremendous work, as I mentioned, and have tried to make it very intuitive and simple for organizations to adopt and use Microsoft native tools to, make their environment organization safe and secure and compliant, but it is difficult for anyone to start looking into that. How do I start? Where do I go? Where do I start compliance, and how do I structure the compliance for my organization? And that is the reason this presentation probably would fill that gap, and your responses would tell me whether I was able to do justice to the topic or not. But this would be a interesting long discussion, long topic, long video, so stay focused right now and be prepared for some time to invest into this area of expertise. Now, when we talk about compliance process flow, what are we trying to do in terms of compliance, right? So at the bottom, if you see these key points here, which is the access, that what you want to protect, how you want to protect, then protect it. Then not only protection is enough, but you should be able to respond, and more importantly, because you're in cloud, you should have the ability to automate all those responses, which is what we're going to see in the demo, by the way, right? And now on top of it, the visibility is extremely important, that all the activities that is happening, and as all of us know, that Microsoft Azure is an ocean of services. And when organizations start adopting all these technologies, it is very important that you have a single pane of glass to see how your security or compliance is being adhered in your organization. So visibility is critical. Then you also talk about what controls you want to provide, right? So basically the controls could be industry standards that we are going to talk about, or you could have some specific requirement for your organization, and those controls needs to be defined and implemented and automated accordingly. Now, obviously, the guidance is the key area here too, because overall governance around all these points, because if you don't, and the guidance to your colleagues, guidance to yourself, guidance to the organization, that how do you keep yourself safe and secure in this modern IT is extremely important. And as all of us know that security is a moving target, right? And I often say that security should be an enabler, not a blocker. And if you go with that mindset, if you go with that philosophy, we all know that the things are going to change, whether it is risk or whether it is newer and newer technologies coming in your way. So obviously, improvement in your security and compliance is an ongoing process. So again, this improvement would be lesson learned, keep moving, keep improving would be the message that I would like to deliver here in this presentation. Now, often when we talk about compliance, we just say, hey, compliance is a technology. My viewpoint is slightly different. Compliance just cannot be technology, right? So if you look into this flow diagram here, the compliance revolves around three major pillars. And when I talk about these three pillars, they are people, process, and technology. And this flow diagram, in my viewpoint, explains to you, because everything that you want to accomplish in compliance may not be possible just through technology. So that's why people and process comes into picture, and they are equally important, if not less, than technology. Let's not forget that, right? Often what happens when I go and talk to customers, everybody is talking about technology, automation, this tool, that tool. All that are important. I'm not saying they're not. They are the method of implementation for your compliance. They cannot be just the only thing for compliance. That's why I strongly emphasize on people and process along with technology. So when you look into the people here, so when we talk about people, people are the people, or I can call them as an operators, right? So when you are operating in cloud, you need to assign rights to those people to do their job. And that is accomplished as step number 2 by giving them the role-based access control. Again, Microsoft has given you enormous built-in capabilities that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you can use Azure RBAC, Azure Role-Based Access Control, that we are going to watch and see in a few minutes. That's how you assign somebody to do their task, right? For an example, you give a web developer a resource group, and in the resource group, you give him a contributor right so that he can do whatever he wants to do. And that's the advantage that people want to take off their cloud services. And instead of asking 500 people to go through the process and create a VM or a web app, now the developer has the chance to do the job as he or she wants, right? That's the step number 2. Now the step number 3 goes around process. The process is very important. When you are giving these rights to these people, obviously you need to make sure that all the security standards are being controlled. Not only that, if you go back to this step number 3 and step number 2, how do you ensure that when people are being assigned to a particular role, what process you involve? So the process again comes into picture, right? This is not a automation here, right? It's still a process. It still needs an approval, disapproval, escalation. All that goes side by side. So even the RBAC needs a process behind it. That process could be manual. That process could be done through some additional tools. That is up to organization to organization. But process is still in the center between people and technology, right? Now, when you go into the process step number 3, then you decide what controls, what kind of a security measures, what kind of a regulations you want to provide. That goes into a wide range of spectrum, including from compliance, litigation, governance. And that is where is a big area that we all have to focus on. And I'll try to help you with that in next few slides. Based on that standards or control definitions, now we have again 2 options. Some of those controls could be very easily accomplishable through some tools that we're going to talk in next few slides and actually demo you those tools and those functionalities, right? And then just the compliance tool, just to identify the compliance violation is not enough. So if you keep moving further, the action is that you should be automate to remediate that particular compliance violation. And all this is in a technology platform. So compliance, tools, automation is all happening under the technology banner. But there are certain areas, there are certain controls that you may not be able to accomplish through technology. And again, you need to go back to the process through a manual process. And that's an overarching target that we are trying to accomplish here in terms of compliance. So once again, process is in the center, which aligns people with technology, right? Controls goes through the process. The roles-based access is also controlled through the process. And that is the gist of the overall flow when we talk about the compliance in general. Again, what are we trying to accomplish? Access, protect, respond, visibility, control, guidance, and improve. This is our theme. This is our theme around overall compliance, right? And let's see what else we can do. When we talk about compliance framework, let's say you are starting in your organization and you see, how do I actually go? This looks all good, Atul, theoretically, but how do I actually use it in my organization? And that's a relevant question in my viewpoint, because we struggle generally with this, right? Technology is good. You can read blogs, you can read articles, you can watch some videos, but you need to have a starting point and flow, that how you're going to deploy or apply compliance in your relevant field or organization. With that, let's just dive into. The first step is to identify. Each organization is different. Each organization is going to use different components, different features of Azure Cloud. So first and foremost is that we need to define that what are your compliance points. For an example, the compliance could be enabled at the resource level or subscription level or management group level. We'll talk about in a few slides. But unless we know that what we are trying to protect, we cannot protect it. What are we trying to be compliant? We cannot be compliant unless you identify those points, right? It's a very logical step. And the second important point is access, right? That's where you would generate all those controls, right? So you need to define, okay, I'm going to use these functionality and features in Azure. These are the services I'm going to use. What are the risk area for my organization, right? And what is the risk scores and description? So this is what you will define. And again, I'll sound like a broken record here, but Microsoft has really helped you big time. Instead of struggling and figuring it out and paying, high-end consultants to figure that out. If you don't have all of that, Microsoft has some real good insight that you could just go there and pick up your security risk points and controls right from there. It's a very easy, intuitive process that you're going to watch in the video or in the demo later in this presentation. Of course, we need to define the people, right? So people where you say who gets what. And generally what happens, you will see that this is where I find problem that there's no single comprehensive documentation around it, right? Which combine all of that together. And in a case of a real audit or in a case of a real security breach, we struggle to figure it out. Where do we get this information? This is very important to CEOs, CFOs, CISOs that, okay, all good work people are doing, all engineering is good. But when the real time comes of see the results of all the good work, all the effort that everybody has played in the security and compliance, where do I find it, right? So that's where it is extremely important that we define who gets what. Not only we define, but all this what we are doing is properly documented in a very comprehensive way that anybody can go and review it. And I think I would help you with that process as well. Now, then we go, as I defined earlier slide, the process, right? So when we define access, as I was talking earlier, that people who are the operators needs certain level of access. What are those different level of access in your organization? You need to come out with a plan. That means you need to come out with a proper RBAC plan. What roles you would need to operate in Azure as Azure Cloud as an organization. Unless you do that, you cannot go ahead, right? That's a very important prerequisite. You also need to define your access process, right? How do you grant somebody a role? How do you remove somebody from a role? How do you deny access to certain components? Even if you have allowed the rights, for an example, if you have given somebody a contributor rights on a resource group, by giving a contributor rights, that particular person also gets the right to create a storage account. Do you want to allow that? Probably not. So you want to deny, even if you give the rights to RBAC, and you're going to see that in a demo, you still want to control how people are going to take the access that you have given in the desired way that your organization wants to do that. So I don't want my web developer to be creating a storage account. I can give them a blob storage. I can give them access to a blob, but I don't want 500 developers creating 500 storage accounts. That's a simple example. You'll see it down the road, right? Define required controls for the risk mitigation. Extremely important. Just identifying the compliance violation is not enough unless we have a mitigation strategy for them. Most likely, and the desired request is to get automation behind it. And again, you have got plenty of choices to do the risk mitigation automatically by the variety of tools that Microsoft offers you, right? Okay, now that's important. Again, we go to the documentation is important, right? So define compliance remediation process. That means what action, who does it, when it is done, how it is done, and did we validate the risk mitigation. All that has to be properly documented so that you know if the audit comes into picture, you know that this was found, this is how we tackled it, this is who tackled it, this is how, which technology we used. And I think the spreadsheet that I'm going to share with you probably would explain you and help you with that process. Of course, technology comes into place because all the specific tools that you would require to implement these controls and automate these tools is part of technology. Even RBAC is part of the technology. And when you implement this compliance initiative, obviously you don't want to do right away into production, and because whenever you deny something or something, it could have disastrous effect in your production. So it's always recommended that you test your compliance controls and automation first. And once you have tested it successfully, you have validated it, then you go to the next level, which is implement the controls, right? It's a logical thing. We all do that, but I think it is important to mention it here because many times we just go in a rush and try to implement things in production, and all of us know the implications of that. So I don't want to extend that, but it's obvious. Now, internal audits is, in my viewpoint, and penetration tests are extremely important, right? And instead of burning yourself from an external audit, it's always good to perform your internal audit and see where do you stand, and to avoid any surprises, any challenges when an external audit happens. So this is, in my viewpoint, as an important step that should be done periodically. Organizations can decide the frequency of these internal audits depending on the operations that they have. But I think people should include in their compliance framework internal audits is an important activity. And obviously, as I mentioned, improvement, right? So security is a moving target. New and new features are coming in Azure. And if we don't keep our eye that what we are doing and how we can improve security and compliance, then we are not doing our job. And that's the overall compliance framework if you look into, right? And we'll go into nitty-gritty details down the road. But again, emphasizing to identify what you're doing in the cloud, then you assess your security risk, define the people who get what, and obviously it has to be documented. Define the processes of approval, disapproval, deny, escalation, right? Risk mitigation. Use the tools, define your tools that you're going to use for your compliance implementation. Perform, once you have defined that, once you have documented everything, you will test that. You will see whether you can automatically mitigate it, or you need to go back to the slide where some of the tasks you have no ability to automate it and you need to go back to some manual process there. Implement it, perform the internal audit, and at the end, improve it. I think in my viewpoint, it makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know how you guys feel it. I wish that I could have interacted with you, but that's how I envision it. Now we'll go into this these two next couple of slides in a demo, then it will make more sense. But Microsoft has brought into some interesting feature that I was mentioning, that if you don't know where to start and what controls you need to deploy in your environment, you can go to Azure Security Center, and we'll see the demo very quickly after this few slides, where you can go to the regulatory compliance, and depending on what security standards your organization is using, whether it's a CIS or PCI or ISO or SOC, you can choose that and you can define and go into the more details that, like for an example, for identity and access management, what are the required controls to be a CIS compliant or an ISO compliant or PCI compliant, right? And you can download this and you can put it into your framework, right? We'll see it in a real action in few seconds or few minutes. Let's talk about Azure compliance and automation. And the first part, as I said, after you have identified your services, that you need to go into defining the access level to your operators, right? I'm not going to go in more details here, but it's very simple here. Microsoft has custom roles that you could use. Microsoft has built-in roles, and you can also use, custom roles if you want to. Most people have not been doing it. I think the built-in roles are enough for almost most of the organization, 95 organizations, to manage their operations around cloud, and especially in Azure. So you can apply it at the subscription level. You can apply this as far as the scope is concerned. The roles could be applied at the subscription level. Roles could be applied at the resource group level or the resources, right? And depending on what access you want to give, there are tons of them. Again, some of the tasks that you would be doing, I think the spreadsheet that I have created may make it a little bit easier for you, right? So instead of going into that, you can define that, and we'll see that in a few minutes. Now, Azure Policy is a very important tool that Microsoft provides you for implementing the compliance. We'll also talk about Azure Security Center, which is a centralized location or single pane of glass where you can see all of that activities. But you definitely need to make sure that you need to consider what you need to use, right? So we'll see how you can implement your compliance. One of the tools that you could use is Azure Policy. Let's dive into. So Azure Policy runs around policy definition. Basically, you will define what you want to do. You have the ability. There are certain built-in policies in Azure, which we are going to see in a demo, that you could define a policy. For an example, as I was mentioning earlier, that you have a resource group, you have a contributor role, but you don't want them to create a security account, storage account, or anything else, right? That's what is the policy definition. These policy definitions could be combined into an initiative definition, and we'll see the best practices in a few minutes. And initiative definitions are assigned, that you could assign it again to the management group. And those who do not know what management groups are, many of you probably already know that, the different subscriptions can be combined into management groups. So instead of going into subscription, if you have a generalized strategy, which we'll see, then you can apply the policy right there at the management group. And then you can go to the granular level from assigning the policy to a subscription or a resource group, right? Now, the policy definition, as I said, could be built-in policies, remediation policies and tasks, and you can also create your own custom policies. So it gives you the option right there. So the automation that we were talking about, some of the automation is possible within the Azure policy. For an example, you say, I'm not going to allow you to create a storage account, or I'm going to say that your VMs are all encrypted, right? And that you can very easily accomplish from Azure policy. So not only it's helping you to deploy your compliance, but it is also helping you to bring the automation around compliance as well. So it's an extremely powerful tool, and let's not underestimate the importance of Azure policy here. With that, let's see what are our best policies here for Azure policy, right? Always assign initiative definitions. So recommendation here is that do not use the policy definitions to be assigned to a scope. You do it only when you are running into a test mode or a non-production side. But in general, when you do the production, even if you have a single policy definition, it's always advisable to use the initiative definition. And use policy and initiative definition parameters to policy definition. So you could say, you could have a policy definition and you can choose the resources out of it, right? So you can say, hey, it could be a VM, it could be a web app, it could be a storage account. So instead of creating separate policies for each of them, you have one single consolidated policy where you can have initiative parameters from a drop-down option, and that's how you minimize the number of policy and confusion around your organization. You can start always, I think this is important, you can start with an audit effect instead of a deny effect, because deny effect could cause some challenges for you or your organization depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Some of them you could straight away go into deny. Some of them you do not want to go with deny, and you want to just test it with the audit results first and making sure that that's working the way you want to make it work. And then you can go ahead and do the denial remediation part of it. Now, the next slide would explain you the last bullet point that I'm making here, that minimize initiative definitions by leveraging management group hierarchy, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that if you have some very generalized compliance at a very high level that you want to deploy across the board, right? So instead of creating policies and linking at different policies, you can say, hey, you can create management groups and add all the subscription. Let's say I have got subscription A, subscription B, subscription C, subscription D, right? And now every subscription I want across Azure, that all the VM, irrespective where they are created, they should always be encrypted. So it makes sense that I put all those subscriptions into a management group and apply the policy or initiative definition at the management group. Then I don't have to go in each subscription and link those policies and make it too complicated for you. And that's the point that this last bullet says. Minimize initiative definitions by leveraging management group hierarchy. I think it is logical, but many people don't realize that how important it could be, because unless you see the next slide where you see the maximum policy object, because it's not that you have an infinite number of policy objects that you could deploy in Azure. I'm not going to read all that. I'm going to leave it to you to read it, but it is important when you're designing it and architecting your compliance strategy, you keep this upmost in your mind. And that's the reason the slide that I was showing earlier make more sense, that you minimize the number of policies by using the common sense. Pretty much use the management group, or however you want to do that, just use the common sense, because you need to keep this in the back at the back of your mind, that you don't have an infinite number of policies object that you could go ahead and start deploying. Fortunately, I have chance to work for very, very large organization where they ran into this problem quite often, and then say, oops, what happened? Now I don't have any other policies. Okay, you never planned it properly. You have to redo all the work. So instead of going into that nightmare of redoing all the effort that you have put, please consider this slide very carefully to make sure that you know your limitations when you are doing the Azure policy, right? Now, we also need to understand the Azure compliance and automation in terms of Azure logs, because this is where you will find a variety of different information that you will have to go multiple resources. I think I tried to compile it in one single presentation here. So when we talk about Azure Log Types, you have got control and management logs that provides information about Azure Resource Manager in terms of create, update, and delete operations. That is captured in Azure Activity Logs, right? So you have Azure Activity Center. Everything that you're doing inside cloud, or Azure to be specific, is being controlled through the management logs. And Azure Activity Logs, if you see down the road, is also being pushed to Azure Monitor, or the old name is Log Analytics or OMS. So you see all that operations going around in that, and you can configure it. So instead of looking into multiple places, it would be ideal if you have a single pane of glass when you are doing a monitoring and you're looking at dashboard, right? So that's very important. Data plane logs provides information about events raised as part of Azure resource usage, right? That was management, this is usage, right? Windows event system, security, application logs. It is done through the diagnostic logs that you can configure against your VMs or web apps. And I'll show you a slide down the road. That is monitored through Azure Monitor. Again, Azure Monitor, you know that it's a Log Analytics or the OMS, the old name. The processed events provide information about analyzed events and alerts that have been processed on your behalf, like Azure Security Center alerts, because you will see Azure Security Center how powerful it and has processed and analyzed your subscriptions and provide a concise security alerts. You also have Azure Advisor, by the way, if you have not used it, and I recommend to look into. Azure Advisor also gives you the information about your security and compliance at a very high level, right? And it's very powerful. Again, I'm not going to read all this, but you need to know that what are the different types of logs. So you have got activity logs, Azure Diagnostic logs, Azure AD reporting, virtual machines and cloud services logs, Azure Storage Analytics, network security, and application insight and process data and security alerts. If I read it, it's going to take me hours, right? So I don't want to read it. I want to leave it for you to read it and understand this all very, very carefully. right? Integration is extremely important, right? So not only you see the log type, but see, because at the end of the day, this integration would define your automation. This integration would define your monitoring capability. As I said, a single pane of glass is better than having 500 places to go and monitor in terms of your auditing and compliance, right? It's extremely important that you choose the right integration options for each types of logs, right? And I think it's self-intuitive. It would be waste of my time and your time if I keep reading all that information. I am not here to read a document or a PowerPoint here. Activity logs captures all rights, that is put, post or delete, which is self-explanatory, and who and when. This is what I mentioned earlier in my slide when we were talking about the framework, right? Who, when, what, within 90 days of retention. And these events can be retrieved in Azure Portal, Azure CLI, PowerShell, Azure Monitor, and REST API. I prefer to go to Azure Monitor because that's my single pane of glass where I can do a lot of activity. So Azure Monitor, I think, is the way to go from my perspective, unless people have different ways to do it. And again, the integration is very important, right? Integration is email alerts or webhook alerts or automation. So when you do that, when you go, and I think I would be able to show you these logs, and especially in OMS side, that you could send an email alerts. But email alerts are fine just to notify, but again, we need to automate it. We need to minimize our IT footprint to resolve our compliance and security related issues. So as long as we can use some kind of a webhook or automation using runbooks or functions or logic apps is an obvious choice. Stream it to an event hub, analyze it through Power BI, and we all know the power of Power BI. Save it to storage account for archival or manual inspection, and many organizations may need it, right, from the audit perspective. Export the activity log with log profiles to Log Analytics or Azure Monitor, right? When I created that slide that time, it was not renamed as Azure Monitor. So it's very straightforward, but I think we all must need to know that what are the different types of log and how we are capturing it, where you can see it. Often this is a gray area in my viewpoint where we struggle to figure it out, right? So I think this slide deck would help you figure that out. Azure Diagnostics log, right? Azure Diagnostics logs are very important, and see which particular services are covered under Azure Diagnostic log. Again, there's no point of reading all of them. You have the slide, you can use it and use it the way you like it. Integration scenario, again, as I said, is very important. You can save them to the storage account for archival and manual inspection, stream them to an event hub for ingestion by the third-party services, and analyze them within Log Analytics, right? So you can send it to the Log Analytics. And again, Log Analytics, whenever I say that as Azure Monitor, that's the preferred route in my viewpoint, because that's one single pane of glass. Azure Directory Reporting, Azure Active Directory Reporting, right? Because it's extremely important from the identity side, and any security without identity is not a security in my viewpoint, being an identity person. And Azure AD reporting architecture relies on two pillars. One of the pillar is the user's flag for risk or risky sign-ins, and then activity report, which is audit logs and sign-ins. You can also use Azure AD protection in addition to that as a security measure, which is also very effective way of doing security and compliance and inside Azure. Again, slide is self-explanatory. I'm not going to read all this stuff for you to bore with you. I am more interested to show you a live demo, because that's what probably make more sense and bring relevance to all what we're talking about. Now, you can also, integration scenario, again, it's important. I have given in every single types of log here so that you know. And it is also possible to see all Azure Active Directory reporting inside Log Analytics as well, right? The last bullet, which is what is my preferred way to do it. You may have other reasons to use other options, but I prefer to do Log Analytics here because that's simplest way to do it. That's one single pane of glass. The virtual machine logs that can use Azure Diagnostics. So as I mentioned earlier, when I was talking about Diagnostic log, you can deploy it on virtual machines and cloud services. and it captures all this information and sends it, right? So again, you can use Visual Studio to trace Azure virtual machines, set up Azure Diagnostics remotely on Azure virtual machines, PowerShell to set up diagnostic on Azure virtual machines, create a Windows virtual machines without monitoring, or sorry, with monitoring and diagnostic by using Azure Resource Manager templates. So when you use ARM templates or Terraform, you can initiate right at that time the Azure Diagnostics there, and you can have the reports around their event logs, custom apps, IIS, cache dumps, and performance counters too. You can also see most of these events in OMS as well, right? Or Log Analytics or Azure Monitor too, which if you deploy the VMs, ARM templates or Terraform templates with the OMS agent enabled, then you got almost the same stuff. Azure Storage Analytics, right? Storage is extremely important. Microsoft provides you Azure Storage Analytics. I have probably another video on that coming shortly. Storage Analytics metrics are available for blob, queue, table, and files. Storage Analytics logging is available for the blob, queue, and table. However, premium storage account is not supported. So this is what is, you need to be very careful about it, right? I am not going to read all of that. Again, this is good information that I would request you to please read at your leisure. And instead of going into 500 places, you have this information captured in one single location, right? So I hope it helps. Azure networking logs, right? So networking logs are categorized basically into two: network watchers and resource monitoring, right? So you can go to these URLs and read it more about it. What I should do is that I should also attach this DAC into the presentation in the description, so that you guys have this DAC and you can go and read about it and go to these links as well, right? Again, self-explanatory. If I read it, again, I'm going to bore with you. It's the same thing if I read it or you read it. So I'm going to leave it to you to read it at your leisure and use it appropriately, right? All this information is also sent into the Activity Center, as well as you will also find them in Log Analytics, right? Application Insight, especially for web apps and web application, is extremely powerful, and more people are taking the advantage of DevOps and Microsoft web app services. And this is where the Application Insight comes into picture, where you could take that and you could also take these logs: request rate, response time, failure rates, dependency rate, response time, failure rate, exceptions, page views, load performance, AJAX calls, users, and session counts, right? I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to bore you with all this, right? But you have the information at your hand. You can use it however you want to use it, but I strongly recommend you to go and read it carefully. These are your application integration, application insight integration scenario. As I said, integration is extremely important from my perspective, because all this good work is meaningless if you don't know how you integrate and where you see all these different types of logs and different types of activity. So this particular slide is very simple. You can also integrate it to Log Analytics. There's some additional steps that you need to do. At the bottom of the slide, you see how you can integrate the application insight into the Log Analytics or Azure Monitor, and I think that's how I would do. If I have to do it, I would rather go this route instead of going into a variety of other integration scenarios. Azure Security Center. This is extremely powerful, and it is growing, it is maturing, Microsoft is throwing more and more feature sets into Azure Security Center. We'll look at it shortly once we get into the demo, right? It will use the machine logging, it uses the monitoring traffic, it collects all the logs, analyze data, it gives you the scores, it gives you the advice, it gives you all the security controls that we were looking for. It's extremely powerful and intuitive. Right, and we will see you can integrate with other SIEM databases. Microsoft has brought the Sentinel. I'm learning Sentinel right now, and as soon as I know a little bit more about it, I would be able to present another video to you where you can use Microsoft Sentinel as a SIEM solution in future, right? I have not done that so far, so don't ask me any questions on Sentinel as of now. All right, Let's look at Azure Log Analytics or Azure Monitor, the new name. And as I've been mentioning throughout the conversation, throughout this presentation, that this probably is the workplace, or this is the area that you would be probably focusing more. All the other different types of logs and activities finally would show up into the log analytics here. So this is extremely important. And what makes it more interesting and intriguing is that not only you can use log analytics or Azure Monitor for your cloud resources, but you could also extend it to your on-prem resources, which makes it as a very powerful solution, a holistic solution in terms of log monitoring, analytics, automations, and alerts, right? So that is the power of log analytics. That's why it's getting more popular, and as it is a cloud-based solution, so you don't have to worry about excessive compute, storage, and all that stuff that you generally do it on-prem. Now, you could create different data sources. For an example, you can have Windows VMs, Linux VMs, you can have your storage accounts. You could also have configure your system center and integrate SCOM with this as well. So plenty of options that you have from the data source. And on top of it, you can also create a lot of solutions that Microsoft is putting into the Azure Monitor. It could be an on-prem Active Directory, status or application issue. It could be security and audit. It could be performance counters. It could be network. And Microsoft is adding solutions quite frequently to make all of us take the best advantage of log analytics, right? And as the diagram shows here, everything goes in those records. Those signals are recorded in OMS repository, and then we can do all kinds of stuff around that data set. We could do log search in terms of OMS or log analytics query. You could configure alerts that could send notifications, or that could initiate an automation task based on you can run books, you can run web hooks, you can run functions, logic apps. You can also initiate ITSM. So plenty of options for automation right there. So for an example, an event triggers it and you want to take some remediation task around it, you can very easily accomplish that through configuring your alert rules. You have powerful dashboards. You can integrate Power BI, and Power BI, the power of Power BI dashboard, that's extremely powerful as well as impressive. We can also export the data. I'm not going to go in all the details of OMS or log analytics, because that would consume another 1 hour, and this video is already going to be more than an hour, so I don't want to do this in this presentation. Hopefully I'll get another presentation on OMS or log analytics or Azure Monitor in my future slides or future presentations. With that, let's get into the more details around log analytics. Again, this is the comprehensive Azure Log Analytics, what services you can integrate into, how you can do that, what are the solutions here. Again, if I read it, it's going to take me 2 hours to just go and read one slide for you. I'm not going to do that. I'm just keeping it for you to look at it and read it. And this would give you all insight. I think this consolidated information in one single PowerPoint, in my viewpoint, is very helpful, because I don't want to go and search 500 sites and go to Microsoft and keep looking for this information at multiple places, right? So this is a comprehensive viewpoint. You can see if depending on what services you are using, because as I said earlier, that you need to identify which services you're going to use. Based on that, you can see how do you integrate them into Azure Log Analytics. Make sense? I think it does, right? Now, you can also integrate your log integration with on-premises SIEM systems, right? I have been trying to do it with the QRadar and other third-party SIEM system. You can also have your own syslog server in between. That's a separate discussion that I don't want to go into this call or this presentation. That takes a lot of other hours and maybe needing another presentation around it. But you can see at a high level that if somebody asks you, if your CISO asks you, hey, can I integrate into other SIEM system, you need to do, depending on what SIEM system you are using, you need to figure it out, but it is doable, right? That's all I'm saying. It is doable. You can put it in there. and you have connectors there for different systems, and you definitely can take an advantage of that. And last but not is the Azure penetration test. Again, I have given you this Microsoft documentation here that provides you the penetration test, how you would be performing those penetration tests. I think with that, you can click on this link and find it once you get to the deck. And this is an example for the compliance, as I was mentioning earlier, that you have web developers, you have given them the contributor rights on a resource group. With that, they get the rights to create the storage account, but you don't want them to create the storage account. So we apply the policy through initiative assignment, the Azure policy that we talked earlier, and we say we're not going to allow you to create a storage account. By the way, that's also the parameters here, right? When we talk about parameters, we chose the storage account. You can choose, when you go to the parameters, you can choose anything that you don't want them to create in that resource group. You can even stop them to create VMs, for an example, if that's the requirement, right? And with that, once you do that, if the user tries to attempt to create a storage account, obviously the policy kicks in and he is denied. Though he has, from the Arbit perspective, he has all the rights to create a storage account, but because of the policy that I mentioned earlier, he or she would not be able to create a storage account, and our goal is accomplished. Same way, if you see here, he gets a risky logon, and in the risky logon to the resource group, we go into the activity logs and we say, hey, we're going to do an automation. It could be done through policy, it could be done through a function, it could be done through a runbook. We say, if you find that, you can disable the account. You can also send an email notification, and the best part is that you have a single pane of glass to see in a reports in a dashboard form, right? If you're doing the log analytics, you will see it there. You can see it as a security center, you can see in the compliance center, you can see even policies, right? And that's very powerful. That's extremely powerful. Now, this is what I was talking about, that Excel spreadsheet. If I can show you here, give me a second. It's opening right now. All right, so this is the spreadsheet that I was referring earlier. And let's look back into the slide that I had earlier, where we defined the framework starting from identifying the services. So the first column here is your cloud services compliant point. So what services you are using. So instead of typing every single time, I put a drop down here. For an example, the service endpoint for me here is, let's say, a resource group, right? Now I need to put a resource group name, and I can say here HR or web dev 001, right? And then I have what roles have been currently enabled on this one as of today, right? So let's say I have given the rights here as a contributor, or you could also have rights on this one as reader, right? I don't want to give anybody owner right unless it's extremely important. Now the dates here, right? So I can put the date here, and I can say today is 31st. For an example, this was given the 30. This is the same thing. I have my calendar here, and then I can say current role members. Again, it's gonna go to the people side, right? So we have identified the resource that what we are gonna provide our compliance. Then we need to go and see the second part was our access, right? The role-based access. Again, following our framework, right? And then we have the current members that are the members of this contributor or reader group. Then the role membership approval authority. This goes into the process part, right? The process is that who approves it. It's not that anybody can add anybody into any group, right? Or any role, I'm sorry. So that's where this is extremely important, that we are following process. So for an example, I am the one who is approving, right? Or here is John, for an example. Role membership permanent request process. How does this goes, right? Does it go directly to the approval process? What is our role membership process? Again, it's process that needs to be defined. You can have a link here to a documentation, whatever the process your organization wants to deploy here. Role membership change detail. So if you're going to add somebody here, so let's say the process is that here you follow it, you send an email to Atul and Atul would approve it. If that is approved, now somebody has to do the change and add that additional user here, right? So if there is third additional user here, you need to put a date here. For an example, that is done on like 23rd, right? So role membership change detail, I'm sorry, this is the detail here. And then the change date here, that should be somewhere here. And then, so when you assign somebody to a role-based access control model or a role, you're giving them a permanent access. In many situations, you may not want to do that. You may want to give them a temporary access, and that is done through privileged identity management inside Azure. Many of you may be familiar with that, and if you're not, I would recommend you to go and look it into. This is extremely powerful. In the PIM, privileged identity management, you can give access, which is actually using JIA or JIA, just in-time administration, right? PIM is another using Microsoft JIA technology, or just in-time administration, another 3-letter acronym. But it would allow you, hey, I need contributor rights on this resource group for 6 hours or 6 days, or maximum is 3 months. You could also do permanent here, but generally people would not do that. That defeats the purpose of PIM. But you can assign that role right here, and that is temporary. So you also have to define the PIM request process. Who is the PIM approval authority who gives them temporary access to that resource? And then PIM activation date. Again, calendar is here. You can pick up any date here. And the PIM expiration date, right? So now we're going to go to what time it expires. So from audit perspective, we have all this information being captured at a very systematic way, right? Then we go to the compliance. So what are the compliance control numbers? So for an example, this is compliance control number is 1001. And then we need to go into the compliance control name. So let's say we say deny storage. Or you could do anything, right? Whatever it is. You can say the description here. I'm not going to waste your time. Compliance remediation. How do we remediate this compliance? Can we do it through technology, or can we have to do a manual, right? Hopefully we have technology to resolve our issue. That's my hope. But there could be some which will fall into the manual category. Again, that's what I mentioned on my slide number 2. Compliance control tool. What tools we will be using? Again, this is all technology this side, right? So we can use Azure policy for an example, which we have an example to show you. Compliance automation. How do we do automation? We can use Azure policy, log analytics, webhooks, right? So for an example, I'm using Azure policies here. And then compliance monitoring and reporting. Where do you see all this effect of this compliance? So you can see, I can see it in OMS dashboard, Azure Security Center, Azure policies, custom dashboard. So I can see it inside Azure Security Center. So that's where I would look into any compliance related issue around this particular compliance control. Then we say whether the compliance test has been completed or not completed. Yes, it has been completed. Has it been implemented or not implemented, or is in process? So it is completed for an example here. And that's so intuitive. So I have got one single sheet where I have got now the internal audit date, because again our flow diagram, the framework that we mentioned, we need to perform internal audit, and here is my internal audit date. So let's say this internal audit was done on 30th of May, and then we have the internal audit result, whether we passed, we failed, what is the recommendation. You can type it here, you can put a link to a documentation, however you want to do that. And that's where you have one consolidated effort into one single spreadsheet of all that what I have talked for last almost 50 minutes, right? With that, I think we are ready to get into the demo, and let's just get into the demo part of it. Okay, I'm gonna take a pause and come back soon. All right, let's start with the live demo here. Okay. So I'm logged on to my Azure portal as an admin, global admin. And if I go to the home page, first of all, I have Azure Advisor. As I was mentioning to you guys, you can click on Azure Advisor and it would give you some interesting information, right? So that's very simple and easy to do that. You can see the recommendation as far as the security is concerned. And you can go into the details if you want to. I'm not going to read all of that again, but you can go into your tenant and see what Azure Advisor is advising you. So this is very intuitive. Now, once we go back to the home page, and we can go to the security center. This is interesting, and this is what Microsoft has really done a good job here. In the overview, you will see what your security score is, different security standards against ISO, SOC, or PCI. You see that how many controls you have passed, how many controls you have not passed. And you can also say make alert data available to your SIEM if you want to go that SIEM route that we discussed. You can set up SIEM connector to the SIEM system that you have, or maybe down the road I'll see if we have availability to do this in Sentinel. If you go and click here, you will see that as far as the Azure CIS is concerned, you can see it here, and you can, one of the biggest challenge that you run into is that what are the controls that I need to put into my environment, right? And generally people get stuck on that because of lack of information, lack of skills. This gives you a very easy and simple way to ensure that what you should be doing it, right? So identity and access management, for an example, these are the two high level things that you should enable. The other stuff that is grayed out either are not applicable or you want to consider that, right? And that is what you could do here. If you scroll it down here, you will get more details here. The red means is obviously an alert, yellow means is a warning, and the other means, the green means is an info. But that's where you can define your controls, right? So, and you say, hey, ensure that users cannot create a security group is set to no. Now you need to define that. How do you implement it? And again, you can go into Azure policy, you can do a function, you can do a logic app, you can go to the log analytics, whatever tool you want to prefer there. And that's here where you start getting your controls. Again, if you look back into the framework, we have identified, and one of the identification is that we need to manage identities, right? And if you go to the identity, you can, depending on what standard you want to deploy, you could do that. Besides this as well, if you have got any organizational level requirements, you could create your own controls that way too. But at least it gives you a starting point. That's my point. That's what I have been saying it. So you get the scores, and you also get the different standard recommendation controls that you could start with. At least you have a starting point. You don't have to wait, hey, who's going to give me all those controls, right? And that's one of the showstopper many times. People don't know what controls I need to put into, what SME I need to talk to, right? And because of that, your environment is at a risk. And that is avoided just by looking into, you can go here, or you could also go to the regulatory compliance here, and you will see similar stuff here, right? CIS, PCI, ISO, SOC, or you could go all. If you click all, it will give you all the required controls. It will give you where you stand, what subscriptions you are, how many you are matching, how many you are not, and it gives you a very good starting point. For an example, if you go PCI standards would be different, right? PCI standard starts with install and maintain a firewall configuration. You could have a combination of both of them, or you could use all of them depending on how secure and what you want to accomplish. But you have the required data set to start making your environment compliant and secure. That's the point I'm trying to make it. And that has been made, kudos to Microsoft, at least they put it together, because otherwise we are struggling to figure it out, that how do we implement all those controls, and it's at your fingertip. So that helps, right? Now you would also see, getting it started, you can see events, and you will see all of that stuff here, right? So if you go into events here, it will take you immediately, it goes to where? The log analytics or Azure monitor, right? And you can click OMS here, and you can start doing your queries and other stuff, which we would be doing it in any way in our OMS side. But I'm just showing you that this is a single pane of glass that I was mentioning. You can do the search here. And again, you have the search capabilities inside the OMS, right? You can go here and you can go and start looking at your searches too. And my environment, this is a lab environment, so it's not a lot of data here and not a lot of resources here, but you can start your OMS queries right here, right? Now, we will go into OMS and show you let's first cover the security center, and then we'll go to policies, and then we'll go to the OMS. At least these three I want to cover today, right? So we have seen that. Now you see the coverage here, which subscription you want to use here, right? So depending on which subscription you want to cover, how many resources you have. As I said, I have got very, very limited resources, just I use it for my testing purposes. It's not a lot of data here. Secure score, I already explained you here, right? You see all this, where you are lacking, what you need to do, and this is at your fingertip. Anybody can come in here, I mean, in your environment, and start looking into, and that gives you a good insight of how your operations are happening and how secure or how compliant you are, right? You have the recommendations here, which is very similar to Azure Advisor, but you have got more details here as well. I think Azure Advisor gives you more. You have got 50 unhealthy resources in my environment. I'm not going to go compute, IOPS, networking, right? It will give you the network diagram because I have nothing here. That's why you don't see much. I'm not using any site-to-site VPN or express route, but I have 7 subnets here, and you can click into the details and start digging into all those logs that I mentioned to you in my slide deck, where you have, you know, all the traffic, all the network worker, and different types of logs are being collected here. So this is good. Identity and access, security options. You also have threat protection if you're using threat protection, something like Windows Defender or ATP. You would also see once you install it. Security Center, by the way, when you enable it, also provides you the capability of deploying Windows Defender on your VMs. So that goes hand in hand in terms of your overall ROI and TCO. That's pretty neat in my viewpoint as well, right? So that was Security Center. I think with this Security Center, at least you have got a single pane of glass, and one of the biggest advantage that you have at least a starting point of your controls. You can figure it out which controls you want to use in your organization, and that's monument. That's very important, right? Besides that, you get all other stuff here that I already talked about. Now let's look into the policy side, right? So I have got a second window here open, I guess this one. No, so let's go to the policies. So again, the good news here is that they have made it very simple and easy to use. That's what I like about it, right? So even if you have not done it, you don't have to be scared. You devote few hours here, couple of hours, and you would be up and running, and you would start doing and learning as you go, right? So this is the best part. So we talked about policy definition, we talked about initiative definitions, we talked about assignments here, right? In the slide deck that I had, and you can go back and refer to slide deck. Now it'll start making more sense. So if you look into the definitions here, you got plenty of definitions that Microsoft gives you out of the box, like in a preview mode here, right? And in our demo here, I would be using probably one of them, which is, I'll see, I'll search it probably. This is about no storage allowed or something, right? And not allowed resource type. This is what I'm using, right? So if you look into this not allowed resource type, this is very simple but very effective. You will say if field type is equal to, and you can do your own query, own customized definitions here too, right? If the resource type is not allowed, then effect deny, right? In this case, we are using deny, or you could use alert, right? So depending on what you're doing, but this is the policy. If you look back here and in an example that I did here, so I created a initiative definition, which is just for this demo purposes, and I have to go into the definition one second. Right, the initiative definition, and if I go here, there should be one that says test. Where do I go? One second. So you see, I have a test initiative definition here, and if you see what it is, policy definition it is using, not allowed resource group, right? So basically this is what exactly what we are doing. We have added that policy definition into initiative definition, and then we will assign it, right? So if you see here, This is the code that we have. And if we go further down and we look into just the test assignment itself, right? And if you go here, test, and we added initiative now, not the definition, then you will see here what we are doing here is, this is our subscription layer, right? This is what is the name, and I'm denying that this is the description, and I'm using storage as my category, and the set value. This is what the parameter I mentioned to you, right? So I picked up the parameter here as that I don't want you to not allow resource type set value storage account. That means now I should not be able to, with this initiative definition, it would not allow you to create a storage account. You could do anything that you like, right? As I mentioned, you can drop down and pick up the different options here. Because I'm choosing a storage, that's why it's showing the storage, but you will see all the other options. Here you go, right? So you can pick up any resource type that you don't want the users to be able to use it, how effective it is. Pretty powerful, right? I cancel it here and I go to the assignments here. So I have used the same initiative policy definition, or sorry, initiative definition. Now see where I'm applying scope. I'm applying it to actually a resource group, right? So that's my subscription, and Atul is the resource group that we're going to look into quickly. You could apply it to, as I mentioned, you can apply it to the management group, right? And if you see here, I hope I can show you, right? You can apply to a management group, and then you could also exclude for certain thing, right? So if you do not want to apply, let's say you apply to the management group and you do not want to apply to certain resource group, you could do that. Initiative definition that I'm using here is test, right? Now, that's our assignment ID. This is assigned and save. Now let's see what the impact is, right? So if I go to the resource group and I see a tool here, what I see here is that Atul is the resource group, right? And I have given the rights to this account, role assignments. This is RBAC coming into picture. This is people and process that we talked about earlier. So AVA01 test has the contributor right. By giving him the contributor right, he gets the rights to create a storage account. But because we are applying the policy, it should not let him do that. So what we will try to do in our demo, we'll try to log on to portal as AVA01, which is I'm logged in here, and we'll try to create a resource. Make sense? And let's say we create a resource here and see what happens with this RBAC and policy together, right? So we say storage account here. And we try to create a storage account. Okay, so now the resource group is a tool, as you see here, and storage account name is demo 1010. East US, blah blah blah, and let's say review and create. Now I hope that the policy should work and it should deny me the access to do that. Here you go, right? So what happened? Validation failed. Click here to view details. What happened here is that the initiative test, I'm not allowing it. So you see the power here. The power here is that of the policy here, that we gave him the rights as a contributor, which allows him to create a storage account. But our policy came in between and said, you know what? I'm not going to allow you to create this type of resource. That's one example of implementing compliance through Azure policy. You could do whatever and however you want to do that. You would have to do, you can use a built-in templates or built-in policy definition that Microsoft provides you, or you could tweak it to your need. It's not that very hard. When you start working on it, the writing that JSON code is very, very simple, very easy. Once you understand it, you would be able to accomplish most of your automation right here within the policy itself, right? So instead of waiting for complex automation tasks, many of tasks you could accomplish here with policy, not only implementing the compliance or implementing the control, but also remediation part of that control too, right? In each definition also you have the remediation task that I can show you. You could also, so you see, you can also create remediation task here if you want to, right? and you can create a remediation task. This task is already there, but you have the option to creating a remediation task. You can have your own code there and do the remediation task as a part of your compliance automation, right? So that's the second part of the demo that I wanted to show you. The third part is the log analytics and the automation here, right? So let's walk into that. So OMS 001 is my log analytics or Azure monitors area where you could confine. I'm not going to go into whole demo of how to do OMS because that's going to make it another 2 hours session, but I'm going to show you exactly what we can do here, right? So what I did here is, if you see here in the alerts, that I created an alert here which is SAV1, which we define here, and there are 230 events here, and what it is doing is actually it is disabling an account on an on-prem Active Directory. How powerful is that? I'm not talking about cloud. I'm saying that if this event ID happens on an on-prem domain controller, which is what is in my case, it would disable that account, and it's happening almost is fired here, right? So you see that action happening here. Now let me show you how we did that, and let me get. So you will see here in Log Analytics how we have done here, that you will see, as I showed you, that there are 71. It is triggering this at the against the event of 1003. So let's see how we did that, right? So if you say manage your alert rules, this is the rule that I put it together for testing, and what it is doing, the resources OMS, the subscription is this, and the condition where test automation is greater than, this is the condition that I put here, right? So if you look into the condition here, that's the condition that it's using. I wish I can show you here. Hold on. Yeah. So if you see here, excuse me, event where computer is AR win12 AR az.local, which is my on-prem domain controller, right? If I show you here, let me bring it here. This is my domain controller on-prem running in my basement, and I'm using a hybrid worker here, right? So you see here az.local is my on-prem Active Directory. Now what it is saying here is that in this scenario, that event is equal to this event log system, and if it finds in system, for an example, event ID 36888 is going to trigger it, right? So number of the results, if it's higher than 1 and in last 24 hours, frequency 5 minutes, then you trigger this. Simple. So what I'm saying here is that if you go into the event logs here in the system, and then you'll see that event is happening quite. This is what I did intentionally to show you guys, right? So in the system, and this is what the error was, 1003, I guess. I was doing in system, I think so. No, sorry, not. I'm sorry. What was the event ID I used? Sorry. 3688, right? So and this is the error that's happening. It's happening quite often. So I triggered that, and when I say here triggered, what you do is that you use this automation runbook, the group type, right? The management action group here, and we're gonna look into what that it tells you, right? And it's straightforward. So if I show you the action group here, manage action group, and we are using 1003A, right? Come on, show me. No. Action groups. Okay, here you go, right? So that's my action group that I use in that particular alert notification here, right? And what we are saying here is that disable account is the name, and we are using an automation runbook, right? It's using an automation runbook, which is what I'm using, an automation runbook that I created here, and it's using that runbook here, which is called as a Atul Auto, which is what I created. So you could use a runbook, just to show you. You could use email notification, you can use an Azure function, you can use a logic app, you can use webhook, you can use ITSM, you can use automation runbook. So there are multiple options here, right? So I'm using in this case an automation runbook, and that is what is disabling this account. So once this account is expired, so if I go to the runbook here, automation account, that's my automation account, where I'm using a hybrid runbook so that I can I can impact my on-prem AG hybrid, right? So if you go back and look into, I'm actually controlling the machine here. That's my on-prem domain controller, right? Now, if I go back here, this is very simple, right? And I have the runbooks here. And where did it go? Disable expired accounts. It's completed, and you could edit it, and that's pretty much it. It's going into this Active Directory, looking for this account which has been disabled on this particular date. Oh, sorry, which has been expired. I'm sorry, if you see here, account expired, and if the account is expired, it's going to disable this. And it's an example, right? I'm not saying that's the only way. I'm just showing how and what you could accomplish through these tools. So basically what I have shown you so far is the power of Azure Security Center, where you have the ability to pull all the required controls to start with. You can see everything in one single pane of glass. You could do it in, as far as policies part is concerned, let's go back to the policy one more time. I just want to show you here. And it would also show you your policy related compliance issue. I'm sorry, policy right here. So if you see the compliance here within the policy, you will see the results here, that what is compliant and what is not compliant. So you also have this as a monitoring interface that you can see into, right? So that's where you can also see an OMS dashboard. So I have shown you Azure Security Center. I have shown you Azure Policy in action. I have also shown you the OMS log enables log analytics as well in action. So if I show you Active Directory, just to prove my point, that account should have been disabled. So there is one account that it did. And that account should be in O365 OU. This is, you see here, it's disabled TO365. It's disabled because this account is expired, I think, a few days back, March 28, 2019, right? And that's why it triggered it, and it gets disabled. And you could do multiple activities. Just an example: stop service, start service, shut down VM, start VM. Plenty of runbooks that are available to you by default, or you could create your own. And that's all I have for today. I hope you will find it useful. I hope it will clear some of your doubts. It will make you help doing the compliance a little better in a little bit more organized way. And I would also request you, if you like it and if you think it's helping you, please share the word and please share with your other colleagues so that they can also start taking advantage. It's not just because that I want more subscription. That's not what I'm saying. Because if more and more people can take advantage of this intuitive Azure builds tools and services, it's a good help to everyone, right? Thank you again for your time. I appreciate a lot. Hopefully you will send me your comments, and wherever you are, stay healthy, and bye-bye.